Welcome back to another episode of the Nebulum Podcast. If you're new here, on this podcast we discuss fulfillment. And our goal is to encourage and inspire people to walk a path of fulfillment. So we aim to provide stories, advice, tips. We discuss philosophies, ideas surrounding fulfillment. Often it will just be us talking, but we hope to have guests on to interview them and hear their journeys on the path of fulfillment. And so with that, we will dive into a riveting discussion. What are we talking about today?
We're talking about resonating with the path that you're on, understanding whether you do resonate with the path that you're on. Because oftentimes, maybe in our minds, something seems really good. However, the doing may not resonate. And so that disconnect can manifest in different ways. However, I believe that to achieve great things, to achieve mastery in something, we need to be totally in it. And in some scenarios, maybe we're not totally in it. And how those can be learning situations. However, I think the goal is to be totally in what you're doing, like totally committed, totally interested in what you're doing. And so I just want to talk about that internal gauge. How do we figure out whether this thing is what we want to be doing, whether this is the path for us? And the reason I wanted to talk about it is actually because I feel like that's something that's coming up for me, that I'm having trouble figuring out what resonates. You know, there are so many different data points, so many different signals that it's really hard to understand what I truly resonate with at times. And sometimes I already know the answer, and I don't want to admit it to myself. And so that's hard too. It's like almost self-deception. And yeah, just wanted to dive into that. I'm sure you have perspectives on this.
Yeah, absolutely. As you were speaking, and as you brought up this topic before,
Have I?
meaning in discussing what we're gonna, yeah,
for sure.
That point you just mentioned about not wanting to admit it to yourself, I think that is probably the highest leverage point to discuss when discussing how to recognize fulfillment. Because I do believe that that is the thing that actually happens when we are not sure about if something resonates. As we discussed, you want some of this non-alcoholic whiskey?
Please pour me some.
Hell yeah. Yeah, so tell me when.
That's good.
All right.
I don't know how it will taste, so.
Neither do I. Well, I tried it, so maybe I do. I lied. Cheers. Delicious. Yeah, so I think the first direction we should go in is bravery. Because bravery and fear. And what contributes to the fear? Because I do believe that more often than not, we have signals that we stifle. And in recognizing where we find fulfillment, much of the work, I do believe 80% of the work is probably learning not to stifle the signals we're getting. And I think we stifle the signals we're getting because of what we're taught to fear. And that may be we don't want to disappoint someone, or that may be we think something is unrealistic because we've been told it is, or that may be I fear the unknown and I fear giving up stability. So I don't want to admit that I want something different, which would disrupt stability. So there may be simply conflicting values where one value is a comfort and another value is a yearning for a more fulfilled life. I'll pause there before we dive into any of those things to see if you have any thoughts.
Great. I think this conversation might turn out to be a little more profound than I expected.
Okay.
I like that you bring it back to the self-deception piece, because I often feel that is a key piece, mainly because part of me feels like I already know the answer and I just don't want to admit it to myself. And then another part of me is like, not sure if I actually know. And doubt arises in the decision that I make to whether, and that's based on different emotions that I might be feeling in different moments, which make it really hard.
Right.
Because who am I? The person in this situation where I feel like I want to make this decision, or the person in this situation with different emotions who has a different decision? And so that kind of makes the waters really muddy. And that just makes the decision a little harder. However, at the same time, it's almost like I have to call on a different piece of myself to really just make the decision that I know I feel deep inside and force myself to attempt to stick to it, even when it gets really hard to not stick to it. And I think faith is super important too in that, because when you talk about stability, when that stability is threatened, if we're uncertain and afraid, we might just run back. And so faith is needed for that. I guess faith and bravery kind of go hand in hand, where I have faith that what's on the other side of this is calling me. I don't know which pieces you want to pick on there.
Well, to go on a slight tangent, because we love tangents, define faith.
Trust.
Okay.
I guess what I mean is trust. Trust in my inner calling. Because often maybe we don't trust that because of fear. That thing isn't the known. However, I see myself as an intuitive person, so for me to feel that calling is kind of how I operate. And that's the thing I kind of use to choose where I want to go.
I see. So, as an intuitive person, where you can recognize when you feel something and when you're stifling something, or when you truly know it, but you don't want to admit it, how do you personally deal with that? Have you ever been in a situation where you have made a decision, where you have decided to either admit it or stifle it forever?
I don't know if stifling it forever is something I've experienced.
Sure.
Haven't lived forever. However,
okay, fair.
I do feel like I'm going through a few of those things right now.
Okay.
And the way I gauge whether the decision I make is the right one is how it feels after that's what I'm using right now. Honestly, I'm in a path of experimentation right now,
Mm-hmm.
in experimenting with, in general, making decisions, thinking about things. And yeah, so being honest with myself is important, even though there are things that I want to want in a way.
Mm.
However, intuitively, like internally, I don't truly want that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would rather focus my energy on something I do want, even though the thing I do want might not make as much money or have a very paved path or be something that's common in society and accepted. So that part of me is trying to protect me from that. But a deeper part of me wants to pursue that uncommon thing that I like. Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive in. The first piece of admitting it to yourself and recognizing that there's a part of you that wants to protect you from something, right? I think the question to ask there is, what is the risk of admitting it to myself? Does admitting it mean I'm doing it? I don't think that means that, right? I don't think admitting that I want something means I am now doing the thing. And so think hard about if the admission itself is risky. That would be my prompt. Think hard if the admission itself is risky. And if it feels risky, how do you make it not risky? Then how do you make it so that you can bring something to the forefront of your consciousness without pursuing that thing? Because if it's the pursuit of the thing that is leading to fear, then maybe you can simply admit it to learn about the thing before making a decision to pursue it or not. Because let's say the two paths, right? Let's say you admit it and then pursue it. If you admit it and then do your due diligence and then decide that actually this is worth pursuing, then you became the person who decided that it is worth pursuing. So the fear you feel now would have been mitigated because, or you would have at least decided that that fear is worth having to pursue this thing. And so that would be a win because you made that decision after due diligence, or you decided not to do it after due diligence. And so that fear didn't even have to manifest. So the reason I'm saying this is to separate the admission from the doing. And maybe the admission will feel less scary because, and the reason I think it's important to admit it in the first place is because I think it's important to understand it. Because that will lead to a lot. If you admit that you want to do this thing, and the thing that you want to want isn't really what you want, then you can ask further questions. Why do I want to want this thing? What other stories do I have that frame this thing in a way that I think it should be the path for me? And why do I want this other thing? What is it about this other thing that fulfills a deep need of mine? And then, okay, the thing I think I'm going to get from the thing I want to want, can I take that thing, can I extract that thing and find a way to also get that in the thing that I really want? You just have an opportunity once you admit it fully to go deeper and understand what it is you really want and what stories are being told to you and which of those you want to consciously accept or consciously detach from. So I think admitting it will lead you to the opportunity to be able to understand way more about yourself, which is necessary for fulfillment.
Damn, bro. Great. I was going to ask, actually, I wanted to quickly maybe summarize what you said, but also I wanted to ask about if you've had some personal experience with this, because I do agree. When I imagine doing that, it makes sense. But I'm just curious if
If I've had
you've
personal
done this
experience with this,
before. If not, that's fine. I think it would just be valuable for people.
I have. I mean, I guess this is one of the examples I always go back to because it was such a pivotal point in my life. The time I decided to take time off college. There were many conflicting values I had with education and having an identity of a smart, intelligent person who can excel in academia or, excel in school and those kinds of things. Because I did well throughout most of my school life. There came a point in college where I stopped doing well. And this was for many reasons. Part of the reason was I went through a depressive phase. I was really depressed for a while. And so there was a part of me that wanted to want that school life or that idea that I'm not sure how to phrase it, but there was a certain identity associated with someone who can study hard and get straight A's and have hobbies and do all these different things. However, there was another part of me that wanted to chart my own path. That part was actually much stronger, and I always knew it. But faced with the decision in that particular instance the particular decision was, okay, do I leave school, at least for a while, or do I continue? What identity will I have as someone who couldn't complete school in 4 years, couldn't complete college in the regular 4-year window, versus someone who took 6 years, which is what I ended up taking, something like that. How will my family think about this? I mean, most of my family would be against it. Luckily, I did have some members of my family who were extremely supportive, right? My mom was extremely supportive. And so there came a point where I had to first admit that I need to do something different. And then I had to evaluate the pros and cons of doing that different thing. Although this is a little different in this situation because I felt very strongly, after admitting it, I felt very strongly that I had to do it. And so it didn't really take that much evaluation to determine whether it was the right path or not. It was hard because I was disappointing a lot of people. I was giving up that identity. It was hard. And I cried a lot during that period, grappling with this decision to take time off. However, and not being able to graduate with the friends I started college with and these kinds of things. Going back to Jamaica and doing fuck if I know at the time, I just knew that I wanted to figure out how to be happy. And that was a more meaningful path to me. And I had to figure that out because for me, at the end of that road was a way more fulfilling path than simply being on the conveyor belt that I was put on. So let me know if that answers your question.
I think it does.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that story is going to be super valuable for anyone in college watching this, because I don't have any doubt that many, many people have gone through this or are going through this or will go through this same thing with the college,
Mm-hmm.
to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
I think people who take a gap year don't feel good about it because it's looked down upon by some people probably. So I'm really glad that you shared that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just think it gives more gravity to the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, admitting it is the biggest step, I believe. I think admitting it is the highest, what would you call it? Friction. It's the hardest thing. Just like we talked about last episode, how we need to kind of reduce the time from waking up to cold plunging, for example. I think it's a similar thing. The anticipation is the hardest thing to get over, the fear of admitting it, because we know once we admit it, there's no going back. We kind of have to do it at that point. Of course, you said you can consider it and all that. However, I feel that when we admit it to ourselves, at that point we know that's what we have to do.
If it is something you have to do.
True. And I think, at least what I feel like we're talking about here is the gravity of these things is sufficient that when we admit it to ourselves, it's like, yeah. That's how it should feel, I think. When we choose a path, we should feel committed to it. It should feel like a deep yes. That's what I believe. I could be wrong. However, yeah.
I'm not certain if it will always feel that strong initially.
Okay.
Because I think you're lucky if once you admit it, it just opens the floodgates and then now you're on the path. That's ideal. That's that's pretty amazing, actually. There may be multiple steps of discovery and admission and discovery and admission. You know, you have an inkling to do something, you admit it, you try it, maybe you realize, actually, I don't really like this. But there was something there that pulled you to it in the first place. And sometimes we start it and continue because we made such a change. Now we feel like we're stuck in that change. So that's also a trap. We don't want to feel trapped by our past decisions. It's okay to change direction. And one should change direction multiple times because life is dynamic, we're dynamic. The more you discover, the more clearly you see. Of course, there's balance. It can be chaotic if you're switching directions every moment, just running around in a circle, running around like a headless chicken. I don't know if you've ever actually seen a headless chicken. It's actually crazy. Anyway, that's also going to be another thing to listen and admit to yourself, because at some point you're going to know that you're on this path and you're continuing only because you said you would do it. Or at some point you're going to know that I'm actually changing directions every second and there's something else going on here.
Sure.
So there's going to be a balance, and we always have to listen for that balance. And we do have to build up the habit of noticing and admitting to ourselves when we feel something.
Yeah. And that's hard because we talked again on the last episode about sticking to your word. And sometimes how you feel just changes. Like, that's hard.
Right.
And that could hurt that identity that is, I do the things I say.
Right.
But to deny yourself how you truly feel about something, if it has changed, is hard and it doesn't feel good. And sometimes it creeps in slowly and we don't notice it.
Yeah.
And that makes it hard to admit, because at one time I felt differently about this thing.
It's true. And I do want to talk about, okay, how do you know then when you should stick to your word versus when you should listen to that changing of your mind, let's say?
Discernment.
Right. Because, well, I will say this. The way you know is data. The first time it happens, you might not know. Pick one. The second time it happens, you still might not know. Pick one. If you find it happening over and over and over and over again, and you look on a large scale and you see that you're not really getting anywhere, you're not fulfilled, you're not on a path you resonate with, something is just keeping you switching, then you will know. So I think data will tell you when this is going to be a case of I am truly changing my mind versus I've come upon an obstacle and I'd rather not deal with that obstacle. However, I think I probably should deal with that obstacle if I actually get to my goal through dealing with that obstacle. So we'll just have to discern through experience.
True. Great advice there. I think of this in an interesting way. I don't know. This is the first time I'm giving words to this. However, I think there's a difference between shallow discomfort and deep discomfort. And by shallow, I mean like something that you need to do and you don't want to do it because it's uncomfortable. And by deep discomfort, I mean you don't want to do it because it just doesn't resonate. The path itself doesn't resonate. I think those are two different things. One of them is kind of cowardice in a way, or fear, or letting your comfort control you. The other is, I truly don't think this is the right path. I think that takes discernment as well.
Yeah.
But the data thing is super important.
Yeah. Data thing is actually important, and more data points that don't simply come from your feelings. Think about the decision when you're in different states. Try to think about the decision when you're in a calm state, a clear state, a state where you don't feel any fight or flight response, or a state where you don't feel a need for instant gratification because you're faced with some discomfort or sadness or something like that. When you're in a clear state, try to think through your values and how each decision will map to those values. Because that will give you more data. More data is never bad, right? And so if you can think through it in, I'll use the word, a logical fashion, then you take that and you also pair it with the emotional or intuitive feeling you have, as well as your experience with yourself and that historical data you've collected about yourself. And all these things provide new dimensionality to support the decision-making process.
Well said. Yeah, I often think it's interesting, and I think about this as well. You know, how we feel when we're not feeling any specific emotion about something. like you were saying, the logical orientation of how I think about this thing or how I think about this decision or path. And then also combining it with when I feel emotionally charged or a certain way. That's important. I often wonder if we should give more weight to any which one. I think many people prize the purely logic one, the clear, maybe undiluted one. However, I'm not sure if we should put more weight on that one or not.
I like this area of discussion. I do think this is highly individualistic, or it highly depends on the individual and the situation, and the individual's experience with such situations. So, for example, if I've never traded stocks before, should I just trust my gut when trading stocks? Maybe I'm just a prodigy and I have some deep intuition for these things for some strange reason. I'm like in the top 0.000. I don't know if there's anyone, but maybe. And I just see things, psychic or some shit. Okay, sure. I mean, if you have the data to back that up, I mean, try it. Follow your intuition. It works. Follow it again. It works. Follow it again. It works. Then maybe there's something there. Maybe rely more on your intuition than the slow thinking. However, if I have no experience, and maybe even if I have bad experiences with following my intuition, where that is concerned, or my emotions rather. Oh, when I'm gonna lose, I sell or I buy or I make decisions based on emotion with the stocks and I just end up losing. Then you're gonna need to rely a lot more on a systematic, logical approach.
Sure.
And so I think it depends on how tuned your gut is to this particular situation. Because the truth of the matter is, while our instincts are extremely, extremely valuable, it's not dialed in every situation. And we can improve our gut in a particular situation through the slow, logical thinking, or systematic thinking, if you don't want to use the word logical. Whatever system you can come up with which satisfies a particular thesis. You run it through that system. Is the thesis met or is it not met? You make the decision based on that. And the more you do that, the more you'll build up an intuition for it, and the more you can rely on that gut feeling. If the type of decision is something that you know emotionally affects you and makes you not think clearly, we all have those things, right? Could be something concerning a relationship, could be something that just, you have historical evidence, it doesn't make you think clearly. But when you're in the situation, you tend towards a particular decision. If you're angry, you tend towards a particular decision or something like that. In those situations, if it's a situation that is touchy for you, then I don't think simply relying on your emotional experience in the moment is going to be the best thing to do. Unless it's an emergency thing and you just need to get out of there, you need to run, fight or flight, something like that.
Sure.
Barring those, right, this is another case in which you will have to know yourself, I think.
Cool. Yeah, that's an interesting one because our emotions do influence us a lot. I wanted to clarify that I don't actually think intuition and emotions are the same, and I don't think you think that either.
Sure.
However, yeah, that is a good point. I wanted to talk about actually, this kind of goes back to even what we talked about with systems, where we preset our environment to help us do something. We pre-make the decision. I think this kind of has a similar thread where in some ways we can pre-make a decision before we get emotionally charged about it. And that way, when we remember, oh, when I was thinking clearly, I actually made this decision. So regardless of how I feel right now, I need to stick with that. I actually think that is a super powerful skill and important. I don't know if we want to expand on that at all, where we kind of pre-make the decision. For example, your phone stand in the cold plunge, where I don't know if that's the same thing. However, it's like if I want to go to the gym in the morning, I'm not going to feel like going to the gym. However, if I put my gym clothes out or I sleep in my gym clothes or something like that, where I pre-make a decision, which reduces the decision that I have to make. I don't have to make the decision in the moment, essentially. I think that can be pretty useful, no?
Absolutely. And this is for cases where you know what you want to do, or there's a version of you that knows what you want to do, and that version competes with fleeting versions of you that override that what you want to do.
Yeah.
Right? When you wake up and you're tired and it's cold and you don't want to get out of bed, that version of you doesn't want to fucking go to the gym. But all the other versions of you do, right? And so this is useful for those situations where we can put the systems in place to not allow that fleeting version of you to override it in the moment. So when you get out and you have to now find gym clothes, and these all add friction and give that version of you an opportunity to override the decision. When you eliminate its window to do that, that can be very powerful.
Amazing. I don't know if you're okay with me bringing up a different topic. This topic is the topic of our different selves, our future self, our present self, our aligned self, our fearful self. Because you brought in that just now.
Yeah. Okay. I want to dive into that. I want to make one more point on intuition.
Okay.
Before. So I did say there are times when your intuition isn't tuned for a particular situation. However, we should always listen to our intuition. I'm not saying we should always make the decision our intuitions tell us to make, but we should always listen to it. Because, and this is highlighting a difference between intuition and emotion, right? Intuition is us noticing a pattern subconsciously. And when that pops up, there is always something there. It's not nothing. It shouldn't be completely ignored. So when I say in certain situations, follow the logic, I'm not saying ignore the intuition. You actually should listen to it, and you should actually figure out what it's telling you. And you may have to use...
And that's hard.
It is hard.
Because the intuition isn't like a logical thing. It's our right part of our brain, if you want to call it part of our brain. It's subconscious. It's not logically understood. It's not going to be easy to understand. You're going to have to interpret the message in different ways, in symbolism, in story, in myth, in these sorts of more abstract things. But continue. Just want to put that in.
Yeah, I think it's a skill one can develop to figure out what your intuition is saying. I do think logic can help. I do think your intuition can be analyzed through that more slow thinking, conscious, logical path as well, because we can analyze different patterns and these kinds of things through logical thinking, and we can analyze where we've seen these patterns before and how it made us feel, and why do I feel this in this situation? What am I noticing about this situation that's similar to something else? What trauma is popping up? These kinds of things.
Totally. I think data actually matters a lot in these situations because often we have an intuition and we don't follow it.
Mhm.
And we continue to have that intuition. And through data, we can understand, okay, this thing keeps popping up.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm not getting it.
Mhm.
And I realized that because of the experience data that I got through doing these things and seeing how my intuition responded to that.
Yeah. Yeah. So in making these decisions, when faced with intuition versus logic and these kinds of things, understanding what your intuition is saying will be an important part of the decision making, because maybe it's not telling you to fear that entire thing. Maybe there's one piece of it that some trauma is influencing how you feel about that piece of the thing. It could be that. It could be many different things. Or maybe you sense danger about a particular, going about it in a particular way, and you're like, oh, well, I don't actually have to go about it in that way. So understanding what your intuition is telling you can help make the decision as well.
Sure. For me, oftentimes, the intuition might just lead me somewhere and I don't know why. However, I do feel when I trust that or move in that way or taking a walk, I do take that turn. I don't particularly know what's there.
Mm-hmm.
However, I like to follow that and see where this part of me wants me to go. It doesn't even have to be me. It can be some spirit guide. I don't think we particularly know
Mm-hmm.
what this really is.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to say that as well.
Yeah. And it's learning through life experience when to just completely follow your intuition, when to say, okay, maybe I should analyze this intuition a bit deeper. When to bring the systematic approach in. These kinds of things will be, you'll have more ways of dealing with these things through experience and learning how you've made decisions in the past and what that has led to. So, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I know I brought up, or I think you sparked it, the conversation between like different selves.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think we should dive into that now, or would you prefer to leave that for another episode?
We can touch on it. It can go pretty deep. So we can do an episode on it.
Sure.
Episode where we dive into this. But I do think it can be pretty useful to think of yourself as different selves. Because we are different selves. The person we are with one particular cocktail of neurochemicals is a completely different person from the person in a completely different state with a different cocktail of neurochemicals and hormones going on. We make decisions differently. You make decisions differently when you're extremely angry versus when you're calm, versus when you're joyful, versus when you're sad. You think differently. You are different. You're a different person.
That's deep.
Yeah. And so if there's a higher self that wants something, it's important to build systems that guide all the different selves through the path that you want.
It's crazy to think of the highest self as an actual person. Because oftentimes I feel like when it's talked about, people are like, oh, my higher self is talking to me. But your higher self is an actual version of you. I think that's a crazy thought to entertain, that you are also your higher self.
Absolutely.
You are also your higher self, and your highest self communicates to you because it wants you to become that.
Yeah.
I've never had that thought before, but that just came up for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So in knowing what path to take or deciphering whether this path is the fulfilling path or not, you will have to tap into your higher self. And your higher self will have to listen to all the different selves too, right? There's two-way communication. At some point, the higher self has to implement the systems for the other selves, because
because the other selves aren't as reliable to
Right.
get the job done.
Exactly.
They're important. They're there.
Mm-hmm.
But this goes back to the quote you were saying last episode, is that we fall to the level of our systems.
Yes. Yes. We don't rise to the level of our ambitions. We fall to the level of our systems. I think it's somewhat like that. Yeah. And so, did you want to say more about the selves?
I feel complete with what we touched on as like a preview.
Yeah.
I would definitely love to do an episode where we dive into it
Mm-hmm.
with more detail and
Mm-hmm.
in depth.
Mm-hmm. So then I want to bring it back around to the bravery. Because, okay, you've listened to yourself, you've admitted it, fine. This isn't what I want to be doing. I want to be doing this other thing. You've analyzed it, listened to your intuition and your logic and all these different things.
You're like, fuck.
You're like,
I know what I want to do. God damn it. Now I have to do it.
now I have to fucking do it. Then it's scary. It's scary to make that leap.
Yeah, it is.
It's scary to make that leap. So then comes in, how do we get over that? How do we get through that? How do we do it while scared? How do we be brave? Do you have any thoughts on this?
I think when we admit it to ourselves, that's hard. Because that one path that we thought was so stable suddenly just drops and there's nothing there.
Mm-hmm.
I think there might be a void when we admit to ourselves that this isn't the path for me. And I don't know what the path for me is.
Mm.
But admitting that maybe this isn't the one right now, that one's hard. It's scary because we don't know. If this isn't, then what is? And that void is difficult, I think. Mysterious even. Yeah, that's what I had to say on that.
Yeah. The first thing I believe would help is demystification. Is that the word?
It is, actually.
Okay, great.
I believe. Jamie? No.
demystify the path that you want, or demystify the process of detaching from the path you're currently on. Whatever the thing is you think that you should do, demystify it. So what do I mean? Firstly, part of the reason we may be scared is we don't know what's going to happen. Something's going to change. There's a lot of uncertainty. How is it going to change? What's this other path going to be like? And so, what can help? Figure out what that other path is going to be like. It's not going to be a 100% type of thing. The only way to actually figure out is to do it. However, there are ways you can demystify. Have other people had similar experiences? People close to you that can support you through the process? Can you get some support through it? Makes things a little more certain that you'll have a community, or you'll have support, or you'll have information when you run into a part that is new for you, but someone else has experienced it or something similar. You have someone who can give you advice or something like that.
Totally. Yeah. Other people's experience of similar hardships, life paths, stages of life can be so reassuring, so deeply reassuring. It's part of why community is so important.
Absolutely.
Continue though.
So build community around it, draw on existing community, find people with experiences, find books, find videos, find movies, find art, find things that help demystify the process.
Actually, the story you were talking about earlier is a way for people to, if they're thinking about taking a gap year, can be totally reassuring.
Yeah. If
Knowing that someone else has gone through it and they were okay.
Absolutely. And if anyone is listening and is going through a similar experience, a similar decision where they kind of want to hop off the conveyor belt, but they don't really know if they do or don't know how to or are scared, reach out. We can talk about it. Yeah. Yeah. I can help demystify at least the overlap in my experience and yours, because everyone's experience is different. However, there's overlaps. So that's one way to demystify. Find people who've been through it or been through a version of it. Also, thinking through it can also help demystify. Because sometimes with fear, we don't think through, okay, what is the worst case scenario? This is actually a technique that helped me. So I don't speak about this very often, but I used to have, at some point I developed a weird communication anxiety, where I was just very afraid to say things. It could literally be anything, the most mundane thing. I'd just be afraid to say it because I was afraid of interrupting someone's thoughts. It was weird. And so
I just want to interrupt your thought. Continue.
And so at the time I started doing therapy, and one of the things the therapist prompted me to do is, in those situations, think through the worst case scenario. What is my worst fear in that situation? When going through that and actually thinking about it, I realized the worst case scenario was not that bad.
What was it?
I don't even remember. It was like,
They'd kill you?
I mean, I didn't think that was likely, so that wasn't even
that's
the
not
worst
likely.
case scenario. It was, oh, they were thinking about something and no, they're not. It became clear to me that it was in part an irrational fear. And it's not that it was like, oh, this is irrational, now I'm over it. It's that, oh, that worst case is okay. Like that, like actually putting myself in the worst case, I survived in my head. And so I was able to push past it a little more. So sometimes thinking through it and thinking about what the actual fear is and can I deal with that, that can help.
Yeah. It's like you were using an imaginative technique to imagine yourself in the situation. And through that, you were able to realize that it was fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So thinking through the worst case scenario. Is it really that bad? Finding other people who've experienced it. Could be someone you know. Community would be great, but it could be books, could be videos,
Could be podcasts.
could be podcasts, could be an online forum in a deep, dark corner of the internet. Careful. So those things can demystify.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm. Did you have? So that can make us less scared. It's not going to completely eliminate the fear. And then I think the final push is, what do you fear more? What's the worst case scenario of not making this decision? What's the worst case scenario of just doing this forever? What's the worst case scenario of doing it so long that you hit a breaking point when you could have made the decision way earlier? Who are you? Are you brave? Do you want to be brave? What's the worst case scenario of being brave? What's the worst case scenario of not being brave? Thinking through what you fear more sometimes, that can help. And thinking about the identity you want can help. It helps me when I think about the identity because I want to be a brave person. I want to be someone who can handle difficult scenarios. I want to be that person. And so let me walk the walk. Let me practice. Yeah.
Let's walk the walk, bro.
Let's walk the walk.
Yeah, I feel whole and complete with this topic. I hope that people listening, if this is a time in your life where this kind of topic felt relevant, I hope that it helped. I hope that we provided you with some just things to relate to, things that other people have gone through that might help you to just feel a little bit better about where you are, knowing that you're not alone. So, without further ado, let's give some reflective prompts.
Sure.
Would you like to go first?
Okay. As you go about your day, week, month, year, life, eternity, depending on the time scale with which you think about things, ponder this. Well, I actually want you to think about something you're not admitting to yourself that you know. Deep down, you know that that's what you want to do. And think through the worst case of just admitting it, not necessarily doing it. Try to see if you can convince yourself that admitting it doesn't mean you're going to do it. And then see if you can admit it to yourself. And then you can start to understand it more. But that's my challenge to you. Think about something that you know you want to do or stop doing. And see if you can get yourself to just admit it more consciously.
Yeah. I think my prompt is along a similar vein. And it's imagine the version of you that admits the thing that you may not want to admit. And imagine who that version of you becomes. And also imagine the version of you who doesn't admit this thing. And while doing this, try not to judge the versions of you. I think when we imagine these different scenarios, especially the ones of what do I fear more, I think this can get a better sense of what do I fear more. Which version do I not want to become, essentially? And just do a little imagination on that and see what happens.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Well, if you are still here,
You are the GOAT.
the GOAT, thank you so much for listening. If you found this very valuable, give us a like. Let the algorithm do the thing and recommend it to more people who will find it valuable.
Comment what you thought. Let's have some discussion in the
Subscribe.
comments.
Yes. Subscribe if you want to see more. And with that, we are very grateful that you listened to us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.